everybody, and welcome to today's lecture. My name is Uzma, and I'll be taking today's Smash HSC lecture. That is a high school resource that's actually provided by HSC Notes. So our goal is to provide success for all students. So I'll go through some of the resources before I begin, because I know you've obviously found our free resource of our lectures because you're watching one right now. We've got many other lectures as well that you can definitely tune into for your different subjects, etc. We've also got study notes, which we've got hundreds of study notes that are available to be downloaded. So if there's a certain topic or a certain area in a certain subject that you're a little bit unsure of and you need a little bit of help, I suggest study notes because obviously you can access that and then try to get a little bit of an idea of what's going on in that specific topic. We've then got discussions for a sense of community, online Q&As if you've got any questions that you want to ask. We've got videos, which is engaging online revision. It's kind of like a break from just looking at your textbook all the time, is to have like a different mode of learning. We've then got newsletters to stay in the loop, ATAR calculator if you do have a certain ATAR in mind to see if you're on track. ATAR calculators can be quite helpful. Articles with loads of study strategies and tips, and heaps more resources. So these are our free resources. If any of these resources are of interest to you, I would highly recommend going to atarnotes.com/register. They are where you can access all of those resources. We've got some other resources as well. These are our paid resources. So we've got TuteSmart, which is online tutoring from elite recent year 12 grads. So really, really helpful if you are struggling in a certain subject, you want a little bit of revision, etc. It's really great for that. We've got study guides, so printed revision materials with top tips to help you get great marks. And finally, Ed Unlimited, hundreds of study guides all in one place. So I'm sure you've seen our study guides before. They're quite colourful. They come from loads of different subjects, even like text-specific subjects in English. So it's really great and it's really useful. So if that is something that you are interested in, again, I've got the link down below for you to access that. Alrighty, let's get into it. So Smash HSC, the final lap. So today we'll go through two content blocks. In the first content block, we'll recap some of the content or some of the advice that was given in previous Smash HSC lectures. And then in the second content block, we'll go through study tips. We'll go through advice on how to study from now till the HSC or prelims, and a Q&A session as well, where I go through some of like the most asked questions, and hopefully that will help out as well. So let's have a go at first going through what we've already gone through in previous sessions and a bit of a recap. So if you haven't watched some of those previous sessions, this would be a great place to start. So essentially the first tip of advice, a word of advice I'd give you, is to have a game plan, right? So there's nothing worse than feeling like you are so overwhelmed with the amount of things that you have to do. Always have a game plan, have something there to help you out in terms of how do I approach this? What do I have to do for this subject? Have a list of things that you can sort of work through and tick off, especially if there's certain areas in certain subjects you're struggling with, you know that you need to allocate more time to them compared to other areas. So mental health matters, right? So your well-being always comes before your ATAR. Remember that, especially during the times where you feel overwhelmed. There are multiple paths to a good ATAR. Right, there is no need. I know a lot of people have this misconception, for example, that you need to choose certain subjects that scale high, otherwise you won't get a good ATAR. Completely inaccurate. So there are many different paths to getting a good ATAR, and just being able to understand your subjects, being able to understand what you need to work on is one of those very important paths that you need to be able to carve for yourself. Take breaks during exam week, especially you've had your trials, right? So you know what it's like, you know the pressure of it, especially if you're in year 12. If you're in year 11, you may have already had other exams throughout. So you all have been through exams regardless, so you know that taking breaks is really, really important. Having a little bit of time to yourself to do something that you enjoy, going on a walk, you know, spending time with your family, your friends, whatever it is, just to take a little bit of time off, because yes, it's important to study. Yes, it's important to do all those things during exam week, but it's also important to take breaks, otherwise you'll burn yourself out. No memorized essays. This is something that, especially for English, they have been pushed, NESA has been pushing, because you simply aren't learning if you're just memorizing essays. They want you to be able to really analyze and go in depth and adapt your evidence, which is one of the things you do have to memorize, adapt it to whatever the question's asking and think on the spot. So it's a skill that is quite important, and it's something that you will learn throughout, but something to keep in mind is, again, no memorized essays. Breaking down questions is really important when you're like practicing as well. So know your NESA verbs. All right, make sure that you know, okay, what does analyze mean? What does evaluate mean? Just so you're able to successfully answer the question without going into too little detail or too much detail. Look at the allocated marks, right? So if it's a 2-marker, don't write 3 paragraphs because you're wasting your time. In the same sentence, I will say do not spend, you know, a very short amount of time on a question that's like 6 marks, right? So it's something to keep in mind. It's something to have a look at. You also get a amount of lines, and those lines are a guideline as to how much you should be writing in the HSC paper. Plan. Not planning is not an option. You must plan. It's so important to have a plan ready to go, especially for those questions that are of higher marks, because you want to have a series or a step or a structure to it, rather than just going in without really knowing what you're doing and just writing whatever comes to mind. Having a plan will show on paper when the marker is reading it as well. And finally, syllabus is key. Please, please, please know your syllabus, because for each subject, some more than others, I will say, but for all subjects, your questions are coming from the syllabus, right? That's what you've been taught, so that's what you'll be examined on. So it's really important to be able to understand the syllabus, to be able to understand the different concepts that are mentioned in the syllabus as well. Righto, moving on. So using tables as past paper trackers. So it's really important to be able to do past papers, because when you do past papers, you are able to really get an understanding and an idea of what types of questions will come up and what your paper will be like, essentially. So, for example, I've got an example here of how you can actually track which papers you've done, which papers you still need to do, which questions you've done, which questions you still need to do. So, black, for example, is when you've got the black crosses, those are ones that have been completed and they've been marked and it's all good, right? So you've done that paper. Red, you've completed, but you still need to mark it. Now, it's really, really important that when you attempt a past paper, you mark it. Because just attempting it, you're not really gaining anything. Yes, you're doing questions, but you don't really know how much marks you're getting for each question. You don't really know if you've learned anything, if what you've got on that paper is correct or incorrect. It's really important that you mark it and you know how many marks you're allocating, because that also makes you sort of understand how the marker is going to mark your work. So then you can get in the mind of a marker and then basically tell your answers so that you can get the most marks possible. That is why NESA always provides marking guidelines along with the exam. So make use of that. Question mark, some sort of confusion, you're just not sure, you have certain questions that you want to ask your tutor, your teacher, whoever it is. Yellow, first of all, could be that it was a good question, it was challenging, something that you want to revisit. Maybe there's certain aspects that you want to, still you still have questions about and you want to ask someone, etc. So highlighting that yellow or whatever color, it doesn't really matter, will just sort of enable you to get an understanding that that's something you want to go back to. And smiley face just means you've completed the entire exam. Right, so this is like listening, reading, question 16, 17, 18, and then the whole exam if you've completed it for that specific year. So you can do this on Excel. If you're somebody that has the patience to draw everything out, that's completely fine as well. It's up to you how you want to structure it out and how you want to use it. But it's just a suggestion to sort of help you keep track of what you've done, what you still need to do. So something that is important to note is that you don't necessarily have to do the past papers in full, right? So a lot of people, like for a lot of people, this is a really big struggle, and it requires a lot of mental energy to do the whole paper. You may like read over certain questions and go, I actually just know that, like I don't want to waste my time writing everything down. So you may just go, yep, I know that one. I kind of like, you can maybe write a few bullet points, but in full, it can be really exhausting for a lot of people. However, if you've not done a full past paper for each subject by now, you can add it to a calendar as you are doing that this weekend, right? So just give it a go. Like, you know, it's going to be really beneficial to you. But keep in mind that, you know, you don't have to, for every single year, do every single paper and fill every single line in, is what I'm trying to really get at there. But do try it out. It's quite beneficial, especially if you're timing yourself, to at least have a go one time at seeing what it's like to do a full past paper. Okay, from now till the HSC, what tips do I have for you? First of all is go over your trial paper, right? Analyze what went well, what didn't go so well, and construct a way to sort of implement the good bits and fix up the bad bits. So if your teacher's given you, or your marker, whoever marked your paper, has given you some advice saying, you've done this really well, you've written your introduction really well, I really like the use of this, just know that, okay, I'm going to note that down and I'm actually going to do that in every single essay that I write in the future. Whereas, you know, same thing with the bad things, you can go, okay, well, I didn't really understand how to do this calculation. What I'll do is I'll actually do a lot of practice on that. I'll maybe research some past papers that have those sorts of questions in them and then try and note that down as something I can improve on. Number 2 is to go over your notes and update them if necessary by checking if your notes incorporate the syllabus. I know some students, especially some of the students I tutor, often tell me like, oh, well, you know, we've got our trial paper, but we're not going through everything because we haven't covered everything, and that's very common amongst a lot of students. I know I had that also in my HSC. If we hadn't gone through a specific subject, or not a specific subject, a specific topic, because we didn't have time to cover it before the trial paper, you wouldn't be assessed on it in the trial paper. So what you'd have to do is go over your notes and make sure that anything you've left out is, you know, covered as well. Continually revise your notes, right? Make sure that you're revising your notes. Make sure that you're going through anything that you want to update, improve, especially for subjects like economics where you need to have the most recent stats, and every day there's something new that's happening in the economy. So keeping those stats up to date is really important for subjects like economics. Number 4 is to source practice papers and sit them under timed conditions. So you've been given a recommendation of how much time you should be spending on each section. So mark them yourself or get them marked from your teacher and write out your mistakes so you don't forget them for the HSC. So, you know, I did mention in the previous slide that, yeah, you don't have to do every single paper from every single year in full, but at least give it a go. Try it out. Try and do a few timed papers, and then if you don't want to do the whole paper, you can just do the timed short answer section and see, you know, look at the recommended time given for short answer and then attempt that, or do a timed essay. But try to do timed practice because that is what you're going to be doing in the HSC. Check your HSC timetable to make sure you turn up at the right time and you don't miss your exams. Very obvious, but just thought I'd chuck that in there. Okay, next up, we've got a few other words of advice. So use tables to track your revision. I'll show you some examples in the next few pages, but the main point is it's really fun and satisfying to tick things off, you know. I feel like for me it releases endorphins, like you're just ticking things off, you're getting things done, you feel productive, you feel good. And that's something that is obviously quite encouraging when you feel like, you know, there's so much to do. The syllabus is still your best friend, right? So if you don't know it, read it, know it. You will not get a band 6 if you don't know what's happening in your syllabus, because that's where the questions are coming from. Make sure you know it. Track your productivity. So like a reverse timetable, write down what you did complete at the end of the day, right? Reward yourself, right? It's kind of similar to that list that you're ticking off, because then you'll be able to go, oh my gosh, I actually did make progress. I actually did do things, rather than going, here's everything I haven't done. Here's a few things I actually did get done today, so that I can sort of like move them aside. I've done them, and now I can move on to whatever else I need to do. Try to create structure. So if you don't like weekly timetables, try a daily one instead. So it's like, kind of like a bite size of, rather than your entire week, it's like one day, and then write down the things you want to get done by the end of the day. Write out your concerns. So write a list of things that you feel like are concerning you or overwhelming you, from the most to the least. So you feel like, I actually really am concerned with how to structure my essay, but I'm really okay with calculations in this subject. So write out your subjects, write out each of your subjects, write down the concerns. So you may say, for English, I'm really happy with the way that I write my introductions, but I'm really scared of how to structure my body paragraphs appropriately to get my message across. For maths, you may say, I'm really good at this specific topic, but I really, really need help with this one. Right, so in that way, you've got the structure of what you are most scared of or most concerned about, and what you're least concerned about. And in that way, you can then sort of go from there, maybe ask your tutor, ask your teachers, because now you've got a tangible list of things that you really want to focus on. So the lines, mark allocation, and key verbs are good indicators of how much lines you should be writing in your short answer, which is something I mentioned earlier. And mind maps. So mind maps are great for summarizing content. So if you've got a very big, overwhelming concept that you need to understand and learn, having a mind map is really, really good for that. Forming relationships between concepts. So it's perfect for the HSC, because a lot of the times you'll get questions that ask you to do exactly that. So for example, explain questions force you to sort of look at cause and effect. You're trying to understand the relationship between, okay, this causes this, but then what's the effect of it as well. Great for active recall as well, because it's a lot of the times it's quite visual. Which is something I always appreciated when I was doing the HSC, is like having that visual element, being able to, cut away and like take a break from just words on words on words, like your textbooks, your notes, like your black and white notes. Having something that is visual, colorful, different, can be really beneficial for you to actually take in that information. Great. Let's go through schedules. So write a schedule in the morning or the night before with the most pressing tasks for the day. So daily, you've got, for example, 10:30 feedback for the creative, 11 o'clock fill out annotations for preludes, for example. So T.S. Eliot, English, right? Create a quote bank, something like that. And then 12 o'clock, do another poem. Quote bank if possible, right? It's okay to write if possible, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself and then be disappointed that you weren't able to get anything or everything done, rather. But you can write if possible, and then if not, you can change it around. Lunch at 12:30, and then 13, so 1:30 you can plan an essay for crime, so move to a different subject, legal studies. And then you've got 2 o'clock, write another essay for crime, and then you've got a break. So it's important to take a break, take a little bit of a step away from your work as well, because that will allow you to become more effective in your work rather than being bogged down by work the whole day. And then you've got, like basically a list down of things that you can, get done by the day. So it will, and at the end of the day, you can tick it off and you can feel that you've accomplished something and you've done quite a few different things, and it'll make you feel a lot better and a lot less overwhelmed, because I know that at this stage, things start to get really overwhelming. Band 6 tips. Spend 10 minutes going through your syllabus and then write a timetable based on the weaker areas. So go through your syllabus, highlight anything that you're like, I have no idea what this means, or I don't really remember going through this in that much detail in class. I need to do a bit of my own revision on it, whatever it is, and then you can create a timetable based on the weaker areas. Productivity tracker. So Thursday, on the 4th of July, I did English and Italian, and then this is what I did. And then English and biology, this is what I did. For example, right? These are just examples. Obviously, you just have your own according to what you want. And make sure you do schedule in a day off. You do deserve a little bit of a break, and essentially having a little bit of a break can actually allow you to feel a lot more productive. Allow you to be a lot more productive rather when you do get back into it, because you feel like you've had a little bit of a relaxing day, you've had a break, you've done things outside of studying, so you feel like you're ready to get back into it. So write down what you studied on any given day. Works both to allow you to stay on track and to allow you to be kind to yourself and realize that you are in fact doing work, and that's great, right? Yeah, so then we've got basically writing out your concerns, which is something that I was talking about earlier. So you've got from most worrying to least worrying tasks. So for example, some of the things that you're most worried about are listed up the top, and the medium, you're okay with it, but you still would like a little bit of help in trying to revise them. And then small is it's fine, you'll get through it. It's so easy to keep everything in your head and not pinpoint where your concerns or your lack of motivation is coming from. So this is an example of a macro to-do list. So it allows you to prioritize your work in accordance to, we actually need to go through the most worrying things before we get to the least worrying things, right? Because if we start doing the least worrying things first and we get very close to HSC and we've got all these things that are actually really worrying, it can be a problem. Okay, moving on to the traffic light system for breaking down the syllabus. So we've got red, yellow, green, whatever colors you want. So we've got the first one, which is saying oh my god, no, don't you dare ask me a question on this. 0 out of 5 gang, we can't do this. It's not going to work out. I'm really struggling with this, whether that be calculations or a specific part of a specific topic in whatever subject. Maybe I could scrape a 1 out of 5 or 2 out of 5, but I would be panicking. Right? So those sorts of if you see a question like that and those sorts of thoughts come to mind, then it's something that you'd want to note as maybe something to have a look at. Then we've got a yellow or orange or whatever color you want to make it. Okay, I know enough about this to get half the marks, but depending on the marker, it could be way worse. So you don't feel necessarily that confident with it, but you feel more confident than you do with the first one. So have an average level of understanding, but nothing to write home about, right? So it's going to be something that you're still kind of worried about, so medium. And then green, you've got this, you've got this, you see a question like that and you're like, I'm going to get full marks or very close to full marks. Please make the whole paper on this. Right, so it's really important to look at the syllabus and then look at, examples of questions, and then, try and create a traffic light system for yourself for breaking down the syllabus. Do I know this? Do I not know this? Take a highlighter, and then everything that's pink or whatever color is really scary. Yellow, I'm kind of okay with, and then green is I've got this, right? So that's essentially the idea of it. So if you do not mark your past papers, there is almost no benefit, like we've talked about. So doing nothing, doing a past paper mindlessly and not marking it, corporate says you need to find the difference, or they're the same picture. All right, so again, just trying to get you all to understand the importance of marking your paper, because if you don't mark your paper, you're not really benefiting, you're just doing it, you're wasting your time. If you mark your paper, you understand where you went wrong, where you went right, so that you know what you need to do more of and what you need to do less of. So using tables as study trackers, so subtopics and topics down the side, just think, what is everything that I can do to master the topic? So it may be homeostasis, right? So we've completed a worksheet, we've gone through the assignment, questions from worksheet marked? No? Okay, let's do that. All videos? flashcards, summary notes, ATAR notes, right? Textbook questions, assignment, and then we've got biolab study, inquiry question, whatever it is. And we've got the same thing for all the different topics that you would like to sort of do this for. But it's essentially a great way to track what you're doing, what you're not doing, what you need to do. So then we've got a few other tips. So for different subjects, we've got different tips. So, but for overall, every HSC exam will have necessary verbs, right? So include a necessary verb, look at the focus of the module, for example. All subjects have them and they are super important. In legal studies, this is known as the principal focus. Include any content or points and or overarching questions included in the syllabus in your essay question. Right, so it's really important to understand like the syllabus, what it's asking you, what the actual focus of the syllabus or that specific topic is, and then go from there. So a guide for writing your own questions, for example, in English, familiarize yourself with glossary terms and add them if possible. Pick out content points that you'd like to cover and look for any overarching questions contained in the syllabus or specifically how it is organized to give you direction. Right, so for science, choose a necessary verb, choose a syllabus point, take note of inquiry question. So it's really important to understand that the syllabus is the hero that we both wanted and needed because, again, it's where your questions are coming from. I know I've probably said this a million times by now, but it's really important. I really want to drill that into you all, is that the syllabus is so important. If you know the syllabus, you know the exam. If you understand different topics in the syllabus, you'll be able to answer for those topics in the exam. For some subjects, for example, bio, you can't really get a band 6 without reading the syllabus. Same thing for economics, for business studies, especially for business studies because the whole syllabus is, you know, different categories, things like that. They'll ask you questions on that. So memorizing a syllabus for business studies, for example, is really important. So you need to understand different subjects and how they treat the syllabus, and how you need to treat the syllabus for different subjects. Because in some subjects, you will really need to memorize the whole syllabus. In other subjects, you just need to read it and understand the different topics you're being assessed on. Completing practice questions, especially HSC questions, is key to success. If you made questions for every syllabus point, you would know the exam, right? So it's really important to understand that. Additional tips and tricks. Never leave a question blank. That is the worst thing that you can do, right? Make sure you always answer the question, especially if it's like a multiple choice question. Just choose any option. You still have a 1 in 4 chance of getting it correct. In the last 5 minutes, just dot point headings, ideas if you run out of time because it's better than nothing on that paper. Don't leave the exam early. If you think you finished early, go back, write more, check everything again, write more examples for the big mark questions because you never know. You could actually end up boosting your overall mark by quite a bit just by doing that. Memorize the headings of each topic using memory lists, right? Create those things that help you understand things better, memorize things better. Definitions are the basis of everything. Read your textbook's glossary as many times as possible and quiz yourself and your friends, right? You can all benefit, especially if you're teaching someone, for example, another concept. You're teaching your friend a certain concept. When you teach someone, it's like a whole another level of understanding because you're actually passing on knowledge to them. So you must know what you're talking about to be able to pass that on. Study your weaker subject first because that's a subject you're going to put off studying. Another tip that I was given by one of my teachers at school was to actually start studying for the subject that you have your last exam for. So for example, if your last exam is economics, start studying for it first, or at least have a bit of a study time as put aside for that subject, because a lot of times what students do is they'll just completely neglect it and then they'll have like a couple of days to study for it and then they're panicking because they've just neglected it the whole time because they're just focusing on their other subjects. When making notes, use the headings of the syllabus because again that will allow you to develop an understanding of the syllabus and you're actually following what the syllabus is saying, and then associating it with your notes. Then we've got, before the exam, have time goals and limits in your mind. So if you exceed the allocated time for that area, finish up and move on, and then come back if you still have time. Certain times you'll be given allocated time that you may not agree with. Just follow what you believe is best for you. Some people don't need to spend, for example, 30 minutes on multiple choice. They can smash it out in 10-15 minutes, and then they have more time, for example, for their essays in a lot of the humanities subjects. There is no point writing lots and lots for one question as well, and then leaving another question blank, right? It doesn't really work like that, because here's the reason why. Mark scale progression. Essentially, it's very easy to get the first mark, but it's harder to get the next mark. This is especially so for essays and reports. Therefore, spending an extra 5 minutes at the end of an essay might get you 1 extra mark, whereas spending the same 5 minutes in a short answer question might get you 3 extra marks. So that's a difference of 2 marks for the same 5 minutes. All right, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Here's some advice from the HSC Notes team. So for humanities subjects, at least business, legal, economics, for every 1 mark, they give you 3 lines. So for example, 5-mark question will have 15 lines, but essentially the lines still act as a guide on what to write. So students can obviously write less or more according to what they believe is best. For English, some people, this is, again, like, it's up to you if you decide to take on this advice, because some people work differently. But what you can really have a look at is that some people in the HSC Notes team have mentioned, and it's quite useful to think about, is that, don't really work with lines, but more with examples. So 1 quote less for each mark allocation. So if it's a 4-marker, 3 quotes. If it's a 2-marker, 1 quote. That's just a niche thing, though, for the subject. So up to you if you decide to take that on, because you may already have something that works for you. But if you don't, that's actually advice that you can take on. I've never really mentioned lines when working with short answers. I normally say for every 2 marks, you need to provide a cause, effect, and how the cause leads to the effect. In English's case, it would be point, example, explanation, and linked to the point. I normally say for each odd mark allocation, round it up to the next even number as well. History, advice from the team is that rule of thumb would be to always fill up the lines. Even if you've got small handwriting, looking at whether or not the student has filled in all the lines is often a shortcut for markers as to whether or not a response is considered completed or not. If you've only written a couple of lines, they may think, oh, this person's ran out of time, they haven't completed the response. I'd say on average, it's 1 point for every 2 marks, so you'd want to make at least 2 substantial points for a 4-marker with 2 examples and/or sources. For standard maths, HSC Notes team has said that they like to tell their students that each mark is equivalent to about 1 to 2 steps of working. For Chem, it's generally a point per mark, up to 4 marks, or might be a point explanation per 2 marks. I probably wouldn't dare to write less than 3 to 4 lines for a 2-marker, but this depends on which HSC verb is in the question. So again, is it an explain? Is it an analyze? Is it an evaluate? Because it varies. Anything 5+ marks should have a basic essay structure with at least an introductory sentence and clear points throughout. Try and figure out what marks will probably be assigned for. So I'd empathize making sure that you haven't missed something that could have been included in the marking criteria, and using the provided number of lines as a guide. Right, so for some subjects, it will, obviously it will vary according to subject, but it's something to note that for most subjects, the guide of the lines is really, really important. Moderation, something that I wish I understood at your point in the year. HSC ensures that the examination process is fair, regardless of whether your school has set difficult or easy assessments, or if your teachers were harsh or easy markers. There is always room for improvement right up until your HSC exam. So your ATAR stands for the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. That is what the ATAR is short form for. Take note that it is a rank against other students who completed the HSC. It is not a mark, which is often a misconception. The ATAR is calculated by the University Admissions Centre, which is also known as UAC, which is something you may have already heard of. You have to sign up and pay in order to receive an ATAR. Some of you may have already done this. Most of you probably already have done this with your school, with your teachers. Universities use the ATAR to select students appropriate for their courses, amongst other things. Sometimes they'll also have an interview process if it's something like medicine. Sometimes they will also ask you to come in and do a test, for example, in law. Like I know law at UNSW requires you to come in and do a test as well. So it just depends on the subjects that you're doing or the course you're interested in getting into. Some subjects will also have prerequisites that you need to have completed. For example, you must have done advanced English or advanced maths or physics or whatever it is, just depending on the course you want to get into. How is it calculated? Assessing HSC results and scaling them based on difficulty to form your rank. HSC results under moderation and alignment produce your final results, right? So alignment, what is this? It's essentially a process that affects your raw HSC exam marks. So exams differ in difficulty from year to year. So one way to ensure students receive a fair mark is the process of alignment. So basically every year examiners look at the performance of an entire cohort and then they determine what they call a band cutoff. So a band cutoff is a mark that a student of a certain band should have been able to achieve in that HSC exam to get that certain band. So whether that be a band 5 or a band 6 or a band 4, whatever it is. So say a student in Maths Advanced achieves a raw mark of 84 in the HSC exam. After review of this exam, examiners decide that the band 6 cutoff should be a raw mark of 84. So the student now receives an aligned mark of 90 on their HSC certificate under examination mark. Right, so that is the concept of alignment. Moderation is the process that calculates your school assessment marks. So if we think about it, schools will give students varying difficulty exams and assessments of varying difficulty. So it's not actually fair to use those marks achieved during internal exams. Instead, they look at your ranks. So are you rank 1? Are you rank 10? Are you rank 15? So now in any exam, students should maintain relative distance between each other, which is their rank, right? So NESA uses your internal rank and the relative distance between each rank. And basically, internal marks are determined by looking at the performance of that school's cohort in the HSC exam and mapping those marks into their relative positions. If at this point you're like, I have no idea what you're saying, it's completely fine. You do not have to know all of this. It's just there. If students had any questions with regards to it, I thought it would be useful to go through. Next up, so students ranked first will receive the highest exam mark in that cohort as their internal mark. Likewise, a student ranked last will receive the lowest exam mark, which is often why students are very competitive when it comes to ranking, or you'll often hear students or teachers, whatever it is, talk about ranks quite a bit. This is why. So students in between are mapped out such that the mean of the exam marks equals the mean of the moderated marks. Okay. So this is an extremely complicated process. This process of moderation is quite complicated. But there is this myth that the harder subjects scale better or that certain subjects scale bad. And it's not true. The difficulty of a course doesn't directly correlate with how a subject scales. So a subject is scaled based on the performance of its candidature in the other HSC courses that they take. So, for example, say you have a cohort of advanced maths students who perform well in all the other subjects. This will result in the advanced maths to scale well, right? So, likewise, if all the students performed poorly in the other subjects, maths would scale badly as well. I'm not going to get any deeper into this because I already feel like it's very confusing anyway, and it's not really that important to know. It's not like you're going to be assessed on it. It's just there in case you're wondering or you just had a little bit of a question as to, oh, how does this actually work? Or, you were thinking about it. Maybe this will help clear it up. But just a quick recap, internal marks don't matter, internal ranks do. Your final marks are 50% moderated internal marks and 50% of your aligned HSC mark. HSC marks are so important. This is your chance to come back. Okay? So study techniques worth doing before exams and what to ditch. So in the HSC and prelims, more marks are allocated to clarity of expression, structure, and exam-specific skills, for example, data analysis or calculation, than many students prepare for. So you may not even have thought about data analysis. You may not even have considered that something to be tested on, but you really need to be ready to approach those types of questions and to be able to successfully answer them. Therefore, you need to be focusing on doing as many practice questions as you possibly can between now and the HSC. Okay, so where can you get your past papers or your practice papers? So first of all, you can obviously access the past papers on the HSC, on the NESA website, which go through all of the past HSC papers. So Year 11 students can have a look at these, but I recommend using, for your level, for Year 11 content, to use the ATAR Notes topic test for more specific level content. Then you've got the ATAR Notes topic tests, which are super useful, and making your own. So converting your syllabus points to questions, basically guaranteed band 6 because you're looking at exactly where the questions are coming from. So there we go. Active recall is another thing. Allows you to test your memory of information and increases your chances of recalling information in your final exams. So some of my favorite active recall methods or techniques: set a timer for half a minute to 5 minutes, your choice, and write down everything you remember about a topic. Read a page of notes, including topics you commonly struggle with, for 1 minute, and then spend a few minutes trying to write down on a piece of paper everything that you remember. Go through all of the possible essay questions or topics for your subject, look at them, look at the syllabus, look at the rubric for English, whatever it is, and then plan them in accordance to possible themes or quotes from your memory. So try and adapt to different questions, basically, is something you can do. Even if you don't want to write everything for this one, you can even just basically just say it, right? So read it and then try and say everything that you remember. That's something I did a lot, is I would just basically just repeat what I've read and then continue to do that and then do it without looking at my notes. So it's important to take the information that you don't remember, such as the finer details, and put that in a place where you will remember it, right? So my advice is, for example, make flashcards, especially for subjects in humanities where you've got a lot of content to cover, a lot of definitions, things like that. So make flashcards of different definitions of different concepts. Make a 1-page cheat sheet with all the information you commonly forget. This is also really useful for your stats for subjects like economics, or case studies for subjects like business. So you have a cheat sheet of all of stats that you can read through before your exam, all in one place, rather than having to scroll through all your notes or flip through them, whatever it is. Talk to your friends about the content. Try to teach it to someone. As I mentioned earlier, that is a really great way because you're actually transferring that knowledge, which means you must have had knowledge of it in the first place. So, essay plans and question plans. So, shout out to everyone who asked me if you should plan for a question. Unless it is 3 marks or less, then yes, you should, definitely. Not planning your answers, setting yourself up for failure. From experience, the students I see plan their responses have much higher success rate than those who don't. NESA designs the HSC so that some students could get some of the marks by basically just answering the question. But if you would like a band 6, you need to break the question down. You need to create a plan of things that you want to write down, a list of things that you want to talk about, and the key terms. So highlight the key terms in question, talk about where the focus is coming from, etc. That's really, really important. What will a Band 6 student be looking at? They'll be looking at the verb, essential to the science subjects especially, as well as the humanities subjects. I've got the link for a glossary of keywords in the slides as well, which you can access. Mark allocation, the allocated line space as a guide, and key terms. The golden rule is to define all key terms as soon as you can. First line, unless there is a judgment statement needed for your verb. Definitions are not really needed as much in English, but other subjects, if you're talking about, for example, business, you're talking about outsourcing, define what outsourcing is first. What sets a Band 6 student apart? Well, it's really important to understand that it's their ability to pull upon additional concepts in the syllabus. So, for example, in legal studies, human rights and crime have many crossovers, so it's really important to recognize how they link together. In English, parts of some modules appear in others. Understanding basically all that knowledge builds upon each other is really important, and being able to show that understanding in your exam is really, really important as well. Study tip: choose one syllabus point or topic, set a timer for a few minutes, and brainstorm all the related syllabus points. Right, that's something that you can definitely do to help you gauge an understanding of the different links between different topics. Tips and tricks. First of all, find your optimal study time. Everyone has a different schedule, different times where they feel most productive. Some people are early risers, some people like to work late into the night. It's just up to you and what you prefer. You have to identify your available hours to study and set them aside. It's completely fine if you're doing other activities, extracurricular activities, or you've got sport after school or whatever it is. Just be able to find some time that works for you, whether that be at night or early in the morning, where you just feel like you won't be distracted and you can get things done. Set aside times where you have the opportunity to be productive and not be interrupted, as I mentioned. And in the lead up to your study hours, hype yourself up, make sure that you're motivated to study, whether that be, something that, I often did was try to make it so that, essentially, if I would reward myself after I study. So if I study for a few hours, I can get a few hours of a break and do something that I want to do in my own time. Or, something else that you can do that a lot of people often do is say, okay, I'm going to study this week, but at the end of the week, I'm going to reward myself because on Sunday, I'm going to go and have lunch with a friend or have lunch with my family in a restaurant, whatever it is, or go out with my family to the beach or whatever it is, right? Whatever you want, but just be able to hype yourself up to do the work because you have a motivating factor. So that can always really help. So you don't feel like you're just working all the time and you're not rewarding yourself, which can be really detrimental to your motivation and to achieving success, essentially. Second study tip is to create a study timetable. So I'm sure that every study skills talk your school has made you listen to has said this, but my study timetable is how I survived the HSC. Make it early. Plan for everything that you need to do before the exam to be done in time so that you don't need to be stressed about missing anything or you're like, oh my gosh, there was something that was in my mind, but now it's gone. What do I need to do? What do I need to cover? You've got it all. You've got it all tangible, ready to go. You cannot just delete something off the study timetable if you don't get the chance to do it, right? So that's something that, it's very likely that students will do. It's something that I can say that I've done before, but it's not really helped, which is why I would highly recommend you don't do it. Make room for it on another day because it's still there. Just because you didn't get it done doesn't mean it disappears, right? So it still needs to be done and it's still going to be assessed potentially. So something to keep in mind there. Know what to study. Please look at the syllabus. Mindlessly reading your notes is not studying because you are not really using your brain. You're just reading it. You're not retaining anything. You're not understanding anything, and that defeats the purpose of studying. So pick up a pen, write things down, talk to yourself, talk out loud if that helps you out. Do calculations, do the theory, do practice questions, whatever it is that helps you out in terms of recalling information, retaining information, memorizing information. If you're too tired to study properly, watch a YouTube video that explains that concept that you found difficult. Bonus points if you can then go and teach that concept to someone else. past papers and practice questions are so valuable, like I've been talking about this entire lecture. Some things that you could do to study is make notes using the syllabus and other resources, for example, the HSC notes book, class worksheets, notes, etc. Write down the most important concepts in your notes or the syllabus in your own words. So, for example, outsourcing, what is it in your own words? Teach someone a really hard concept because, again, it will feel rewarding. You'll be able to understand it better as you're explaining it as well. Past papers and practice questions, palm cards, draw pretty diagrams if that's something that is of interest to you. Some people just hate drawing, so it might not be for you. But I found that having a visual aspect or a visual element to my studying really helped me break away from just the black and white notes, as I mentioned earlier. Record yourself explaining things and listen back on it later as well, if that helps, especially for subjects like English, where you might be analysing and you may come up with a brilliant thought, but you may just forget it later. So just record it, like press record, say what you need to say, and then you can listen back on it later, write it down, whatever it is. The cram sheet. So, disclaimer, I am not endorsing cramming the entire syllabus the night before. That is a big no-no. Don't do it. When it gets to the night before, however, whatever you do know isn't leaving your brain before the exam. It's the next day. Like, it'll be fine. But the stuff you don't know will definitely not be in your brain. So get a sheet of paper, go through your notes, write a super condensed summary of anything that you don't know. So for example, if you're going through the legal studies syllabus, you've got your legal exam the next day, go through your legal studies syllabus and go, actually, I don't really understand the different aspects in this specific part of the syllabus. I don't really understand what police powers are. Well, I don't really understand the Crimes Act. Well, that would be really worrying, but a specific part of the Crimes Act, right? So try and create a super condensed summary, then focus on your cram sheet between the night before and the day of the exam. Diagrams, dot points, key points, colour are highly recommended, right? So for example, the Crimes Act is majority of the crime syllabus, the crime component of the syllabus, which is why I said it would be quite worrying if you don't know it. But let's say, for example, you don't know a specific part of it, you don't know the police powers part of it, or whatever it is, then you can highlight it and then go from there. Understanding compared to memorizing. Understanding will always outweigh memorizing. Something that took me way too long was to realize the value of understanding concept as opposed to just memorizing them. So exams are going to ask you to apply the information rather than just regurgitate facts. They are not rewarding people who regurgitate facts, right? You may get a couple of marks, but you're not going to get the full marks, especially for the questions that are on the higher end of the marking scale. Explain concepts in your own words. Explain it to your siblings, explain it to your pets, explain it to your parents, explain it to your friends, explain it to the wall, whatever it is, right? Just explain it. Be able to go through it again and again until you have your own understanding of it. So to write notes or to not write notes, that is the question. It's definitely a personal preference. Like, I won't be here telling you whether you should or you shouldn't, because some people really benefit from it and other people just don't find it really adding any value. So HSC notes books, for example, can help if you feel like you're wasting time writing notes or you're not really getting any value out of the process, but you want a summary of the course. So if you are a notes person, make sure you update them regularly. Make sure you keep them pretty so you can, stay motivated, I guess, or to have something to break off from black and white notes. So diagrams, colors, simple and condensed. Base them off the syllabus. So have the syllabus headings, have the syllabus points, and then have your notes. To avoid procrastination, you can definitely have a study timetable, designate break times, but don't interrupt yourself if you're on a roll. If you're writing an essay and you're really into it and your break alarm goes off, just say, oh, actually, I'll have my break after I finish this essay because I'm doing well right now and I just want to finish it off. So don't feel like you need to have that specific time. At that moment you need to get up, right? So don't let your brain get bored. To change your study environment regularly. Go to a library, go to a cafe, go to a different room, right? Whatever it is. Change up the subject that you're studying as well. Change up the type of study that you're doing. So reward yourself, stay active, stay healthy, remove your phone from the situation because it will definitely help. To summarize, print out the syllabus, go through it with a fine tooth comb, basically a highlighter, and highlight the dot points you're weak on or you'd like to, work on getting more content for. Prioritize those dot points, improve your notes, or if you already have them, or make cram sheets if you don't. Timed practice responses, so essays and short answers, doing multiple choice every multiple choice you can find on the sun. They're so easy, they're so quick. Not always easy, but they're so quick, I guess, compared to like doing short answers and doing essays. So try to do as many as you can. Get your responses marked and get feedback. Make palm cards and do brainstorms as well, as I've talked about. Do more essays, keep reading your notes, keep updating them. Keep communicating with your teachers, your tutors, study with your peers, teach content to others, all of that. So for the Year 12s and the Year 11s before exams, what should you stop focusing on? Well, writing notes, know when to move on to practice exams. I did not have notes for some subjects and I don't regret that approach. So making notes on a needs basis is way better for some students, and that may be the case for you too. So just identify if you're one of those people as well. Passive study techniques, so reading the textbook without doing active recall techniques, you may as well rest during these less productive study hours, right? So just reading it without really understanding or retaining it doesn't help at all. And studying in a way that is inauthentic to you. So some people study for 2 hours a day and get a great ATAR. Some study for more, but the most important thing is to take care of your mental health and study in a way which works for you. So some frequently asked questions. So if I have X mark, can I get an X amount in my HSC? Yes, and yes. Your rank is so much more important than your mark. So your internal mark is really irrelevant, and actually you may never know what it is. So I know some people who also had massive glow-ups between trials and the HSC and got amazing ATARs. So it'll all work out if you incorporate your feedback, right? So read your syllabus. Just make sure that you've got that aspect there as well. Do I have to study for whatever amount of hours every day? I don't know how to do that. Short answer, no. Long answer, some days you may study for hours, right? Other days you may do lighter study or no study. At the end of the day, NESA gives you a list of content to cover for the HSC. Some people do that in more hours than others. It just depends on your level of productivity and your level of efficiency in getting that all done. I personally was very against the idea of sitting at my desk for hours. Strategies like going through your syllabus and focusing on the weak areas will cut down your study by hours, especially if you already know certain concepts. You don't really need to keep going through them again and again and again. I also recommend that doing a past paper for 3 hours is much more effective than revising for 5 hours, because in that 3 hours you're putting yourself in the situation that you're going to be in on the days of your HSC papers. Unless you don't know anything you're doing in that past paper, then maybe go in and revise and then do the past paper. How do I even study? Great question. It's up to you, but here are my tips. So find a way which works for you to understand and memorize the content, as I've been sort of drilling this entire lecture. So memorization should not be used as often. You can still use it in certain subjects like business. You need to memorize your syllabus. Unfortunately, that is a little bit of a hefty thing to get out of the way, but once you've got it out of the way, you'll realize the importance of it. Also memorizing like quotes in English, things like that, those things that unfortunately you just have to do. I was quite experimental with my study, so I basically tried a bit of everything. I recommend the same. It keeps things interesting, which is essential for someone like me who can get very bored just sitting there looking at things that are just of like the same like concepts, like, just looking at notes or just looking at your textbook. Like having a mixture of things can really help keep your brain entertained, and if you're gonna go through it, may as well make it at least a little bit entertaining. Okay, so then we've got how many essays, practice responses, etc. should I be doing every week? However many you feel like you need to do. So the more the better. The more you do, the quicker and easier it will be. So I would aim to do 2 per subject per week in the lead up to your HSC, and you will get really good at them if you keep practicing. So you will be so grateful that you did them, and it will get easier essentially. So what is crazy, but I do relate to being in your shoes, is that some students never attempt HSC questions before the HSC, but don't do it, right? So I know that it's tempting, but don't do it. Make sure that you do attempt your practice papers. So half an hour exercise could literally boost your marks by a whole band. How do I memorize notes and stats? My biggest tip is to learn them in context by using them. So you learn evidence through using them in responses. So think about the facts that you know. They're easier to remember if it was said in a sentence, for example. So evidence learned in isolation without any context or anything is very hard to remember. So this comes back to why it's so important to go through your syllabus and practice responses for each point, right? So really think about it. So yeah, so essentially just make sure that you're looking at the context, and then you're going to think about how you want to approach that specific stat. But yeah, essentially that concludes today's lecture and today's FAQs. I hope that you found this lecture a little bit, of a guide as to what to do from now, because I know it's quite stressful and I completely empathize with you. I was there once too, so I completely understand that this is a very difficult time for a lot of students and they can feel very overwhelmed and really unsure of what to do. But I hope that this gave you a little bit of ease and that you will consider incorporating some of the techniques that you haven't already incorporated into your study routine. But other than that, I'd like to say thank you all for listening in, and yeah, I hope that you do incorporate those techniques and that you do smash the HSC.